Left or right? Who really causes political violence?
Mr. Reagan.
Before we get into it, if you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to my other channel, Strange Tales, and you've hit that notification bell. I got a new fantastic episode coming out, so stay tuned for that. The link is in the description below.
Why is J.D. Vance continuing to lie when Cato, when CSIS, when every other study shows that the predominance of political violence in America has come from the right? And again, you don't hear me saying, oh, this is all the Republicans' fault. What you hear me saying is these people are crazy, and we, the 90% of the sane people in America, we need to come together.
Leftists constantly claim that most political violence comes from the right. We've heard this constantly since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. This is a lie. But it got me thinking, why do they all seem so convinced of this? So of course, I looked into it. And it turns out it is entirely based on completely fabricated studies. Just made-up data produced by leftists. Stuff that is completely accepted by leftist journalists and politicians, hook, line, and sinker. They don't care about the truth. They just want to believe it, and so they don't look into the specific instances with any degree of scrutiny. But I did. And I can report to you here, most so-called right-wing violence isn't actually right-wing at all. In fact, none of the cases I looked into would I actually consider right-wing violence. Now, a lot of the cases that have been listed in these data sets are very obviously not right-wing, and we'll get into those a little bit later. But first, I want to talk about some of the more convincing cases of right-wing violence, because even that stuff isn't actually right-wing. I looked into several famous so-called far-right killers, and as it turns out, none of them that I looked into were far-right at all. They were all compulsively violent psychopaths, natural-born killers who simply wanted to murder people. These monsters were looking for an excuse, any excuse. And because the media constantly tells everyone that the right is violent, these killers adopted right-wing personas to justify their inevitable murders. These guys were never motivated by conservative ideas. They were all motivated by deranged bloodlust. Take Anders Breivik, probably the most famous of these killers that I looked into. He was a Norwegian man who killed 77 people. This guy is the proto-far-right mass murderer. A lot of the so-called far-right murderers that came after him cited this guy as their inspiration. And everyone calls Breivik a right-wing white supremacist. But actually, he believed in nothing. He has admitted to lying about his beliefs. He plagiarized his manifesto. He claimed to hate Muslims, but he killed white Norwegians. The man was never far right. He just wanted to kill people. I also looked into Jared Lee Lautner, who shot Gabby Giffords. Now, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, tried claiming that this guy was right-wing, but he was an atheist conspiracy theorist who hated Christianity. He wasn't right-wing. He was just nuts. Another motivation for some mass murderers is fame. And if you're a psychopath who wants to become famous for mass murder, what's your best strategy? Claim right-wing motivation. NBC, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, and CNN will all talk about you for weeks. Left-wing shooters? They all get swept under the rug. The media literally incentivizes killers to pretend to be right-wing. And this is the distinction that I found between so-called far-right killers and radical left killers. Because the radical left killers, it appears, are in fact radicalized by the left. They are true believers. These guys are convinced by leftist media and online radicals to actually believe that killing is a means to an end. These guys are not natural-born killers. They don't have a compulsion to murder. These guys are driven to it by the left. They are brainwashed into believing that by murdering conservatives, they're doing something good. They really think they're killing Hitler. The Charlie Kirk assassin was clearly radicalized by leftist propaganda. This is irrefutable. Same with all of the trans shooters. Same with the more recent ICE shooter. And here's what's really disturbing. The left openly celebrates this violence, creating even more incentive for the next brainwashed radical. We're going to get into all of this in a little bit more depth in one moment. First, of course, I have to sell you something. A lot of people drink way too much in college, and a lot of people carry these habits over into the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and even beyond. And a lot of people hit the party scene and they try drugs. Maybe you're on painkillers, antidepressants, maybe something else. All these things can destroy your liver over time. I personally take medication daily for an inherited chronic illness, and I'm sure many of you can relate. And this is why Purge is offering their new liver cleanse products for anyone who needs to clear those toxins out once and for all. PurgeStore.com offers everything you need to cleanse and detox your body. Powerful enzymes and probiotics, 15-day colon cleanse protocols, a parasite cleanse, and of course, the liver cleanse. Use Reagan as a promo code and get 15% off. If you are worried about the health of your liver, check out PurgeStore.com today. The link is in the description below. So as I said at the top of the show, a lot of leftists use these sham statistics to say that the far right commits far more acts of political violence. There are a number of studies that leftists cite. The primary ones are the Prosecution Project, a Cato Institute study, and the Anti-Defamation League's Murder and Extremist reports. But there's also the CSIS dataset, the New American dataset, START's Global Terrorism Database, GAO reports, and the ACLED US dataset. But here's the trick. All of these studies are from radical left organizations that cook the books. Cato is libertarian, but their study is also total garbage. To give you an idea of who produces these datasets, here is the guy that produces the one from the Prosecution Project.
When I pierced my septum, I did it largely for a dog whistle approach, because the only people I knew with septum piercings were anarchists, and it was a person-to-person, hey, I get you kind of signal. And that's why I did it. I'm like self-aware enough to know that.
This guy has written about himself as an Antifa revolutionary, and he is disappointed that he is a data nerd and not shooting bullets at the far right. So yeah, not exactly a neutral arbiter of truth. But all of these studies use similar tricks. For one thing, they all conveniently exclude riots and property destruction by leftists like the 2020 BLM riots that caused over 25 deaths and $2 billion in damage. Somehow that never seems to count in these studies. Remember all the attacks on Tesla dealerships, arson, vandalism, even shootings? These were all 100% acts of politically motivated terrorism, but they're all excluded. Since Trump's 2016 election, there have been countless documented acts of left-wing violence or threats of left-wing violence. Assaults on Republican lawmakers, vandalism of conservative offices, all downplayed as protests. The data is cherry-picked, mischaracterized, and sometimes leftist political violence is straight up characterized as right-wing political violence. This is because the leftist organizations that compile this data have no ethics, and yet these absurd statistics are still cited.
Aaron Danielson, shot point blank dead because he was a Trump voter. And the man, Reinhold, it was Michael Reinhold who shot him, told the cops, I got the Trump supporter, dead. We agree that's political violence?
Yes, of course.
Not a single one of these places cites it. It doesn't exist. The point is they come from two places, TPP, the Prosecution Project, or a Cato study, which is reflected by the CSIS as well, where Cato tried to say there's 6 times the amount of domestic terrorism deaths. TPP said right-wing general violence. By the way, all of them agree that in the last year, since Donald Trump has been elected, even now they agree 2 to 3 times more leftist violence than right-wing violence. But that was never included. In other words, when they say there's more right-wing political violence, that's not included as left-wing political violence. You know what else isn't? All the riots, the billions in damages, the 37 dead during the George Floyd riots, the thousands of officers assaulted, the thousands of casualties, that's not included.
The media covers this stuff up constantly too. When the radical left domestic terrorist organization called Jane's Revenge committed arson attacks on pro-life groups in 2022, ABC, CBS, NBC, and MSNBC all refused to even name the group. Another trick that the leftists putting out this fraudulent data use is that they will cite violence by the Aryan Brotherhood. Now, the Aryan Brotherhood is a white supremacist prison gang. And first of all, I'd just like to point out that it is absurd that anything around white supremacy or racism is associated with the right. Conservatives totally disassociate ourselves with racism completely. This is something that is falsely associated with us by the left. But None of these studies make that distinction at all. The thing is that the left actually does embrace the radical left, the complete crazy leftists, like communists and stuff like that. And so they want us to have a radical right as a counterbalance. But there is no radical right. We disagree with white supremacists. We disagree with racists. But okay, regardless of that, here is the even crazier thing. The Aryan Brotherhood is not actually that white supremacist. It's more like branded as white supremacists. It's like how Taco Bell is branded as Mexican food. And okay, look, I'm sure there are some guys in the Aryan Brotherhood who are actual racists, right? But in reality, that is not the most significant aspect of their organization. This is a standard criminal prison gang. Their priorities are money, drugs, and survival in prison. But if there is a prison fight and a member of the Aryan Brotherhood is involved, you can be sure that this will get included in these political violence lists as far-right political violence. Another annoying thing is that they actually list convictions of January 6 protesters as instances of far-right political violence. So even just from that, I think you understand how valid these datasets really are. But the left uses these fake lists to say that we're the bad guys. But you never hear them cite any legitimate examples, they just cite the studies. But here's a real study that I think you will find interesting. YouGov did a survey on whether or not political violence was justified. And among very conservative Americans, just 3% thought political violence could be justified. Among very liberal Americans, 25% said they believe that political violence can be justified. That is a massive difference. This survey kind of contradicts the political violence studies. And of course, we all saw the difference between how the left and the right react to acts of political violence. The right always condemns it outright, but as we saw with the Charlie Kirk assassination, the left celebrates. The problem is that leftists believe anything they're told. Every person celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk, they always cite Charlie Kirk quotes that have been taken completely out of context. These guys don't care about the truth. They love living in their leftist fantasy bubble where conservatives are all evil and they are all heroes. Here's the bottom line. Conservatives are not radicalizing anyone. Our ideology comes from the Christian European ethic. We believe in the rule of law. We believe in civility. And we believe in winning the debate. We believe in truth. We believe in discovering the truth, in expressing the truth, and convincing others of the truth. We don't want to beat leftists into submission. We don't want to scare leftists into agreeing with us. And we do not want to murder those who oppose our political philosophy. But leftists do. Leftists are radicalizing people to violence through constant dehumanization of their opponents. And everybody sees it now. And here is the raw truth. Leftists can no longer win the ideological debate. The problem is that they have abandoned reality. They essentially ignore facts and data relevant to almost every issue. It could be argued that they have a compelling argument and some support from scientific research on two issues: abortion and climate change. Obviously, conservatives don't find their arguments compelling, but your average Democrat voter, or even the average political agnostic, does. But with almost every other issue, logic, facts, and even basic morality is against them. And so it's very difficult, even for the average Democrat voter or political agnostic, to fight strongly for the leftist position. Leftists insist that Black Americans are oppressed, but Black Americans commit so much crime and they are so belligerent with police that it is hard to have any real sympathy for them. Leftists insist that transgender Americans are oppressed, but when you've got these guys who are clearly guys obliterating girls in girls' sports and male prisoners saying that they identify as female to get into women's prison to abuse the women there, and you got these obvious sexual predators walking into girls' bathrooms to satisfy their disgusting perversions. And we've got new transgender shooters popping up every week. And when you got claims like obesity is healthy and there's no difference between men and women and defunding the police will reduce crime and men can get pregnant and real communism has never been tried. When you got all these arguments on and on and on, it's very hard to convince average people that you're right about anything. Many leftist positions strain credulity, even for Democrat voters. And so leftists have kind of painted themselves into a corner. And when you do that, what happens? When you can't win the war of ideas, you flip it to a real war, a war with guns and bullets. You ever see those videos where a leftist is having a discussion on the street and they can't win the war of words and so they lash out violently? That's what happened to Charlie Kirk, but obviously at a whole other level. So this is why the left has to lie. This is why the left has to lash out. This is why the left has to kill. They cannot win with ideas, so they attack us physically. So next time the media reports a right-wing shooter, you have permission to assume that it's a lie, because it almost certainly will be. Mass shooters are rarely, if ever, actually right-wing, but they are very often left-wing true believers. The left doesn't have a violent fringe. Violence is now their mainstream position. And until we acknowledge that, it will only get worse. Before we go, be sure to subscribe to my other channel, Strange Tales. As I said, I've got a new fantastic episode coming out, so make sure you're subscribed and you've hit that notification bell. The link is in the description below. That's it for me. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just they know so much. That is not so. Good night.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.